Hi, my name is Leah. Thanks for tuning in to this week's podcast. Don't forget, you can always follow us on social media to keep up with what's happening around here, and you can always give online at 828church.com/give. Hope you enjoy the message.
We are in week 5 of our Nehemiah series, and it's been cool to kind of parallel this story from the book of Nehemiah about the rebuilding of the walls of Jerusalem with what it looks like in our culture here in 2020 when we consider the fact that there's a lot of brokenness, and because of the brokenness and maybe the fact that truth isn't being understood and or applied to our lives, we often find ourselves really vulnerable, broken, and even bound. Like we're unnecessarily living lives that are broken when God has a plan for us that leads to health and healing. It doesn't mean that a life lived in God's truth will always go without any hitch, right, or any kind of a problem. That's not the communication at all. In fact, we'll talk about that just now. But what it does mean is whatever the circumstance or situation, when we live into who God is and who He made us to be, we can live through every season and situation with peace and joy and purpose. You understand what I'm saying? And I know that this is so. I've certainly experienced it personally and seen it in the lives of others as well. We're not going to eliminate the fact that what Jesus said is so. In this life you will have trouble, but we could live into the truth that He said when He said, but be of good cheer because I've overcome, right? I've overcome the world. And in the book of Nehemiah, the first 4 chapters, what we're really looking at is his journey toward recognizing the need, getting not just permission, but being given authority by the king to address the need. I think sometimes, I said this last week, we feel like we've been given permission, right, to address the brokenness. We've been given a lot more than permission, Joe, belated happy birthday. We've been given authority, right, to address the brokenness that lives in us and around us. God's given us the authority to do that. And we literally have letters from the king. This truth matters. In the name of Jesus is real, right? But when you look at those first few chapters, there was certainly a space where Nehemiah had to inspire people to care again about the brokenness. There was a lot of communication in that. And then people did step up and stand up and decide to participate in rebuilding the wall and believing in truth. And that happened. And all of that, you see, Donna is kind of addressing the brokenness of the wall physically. There was certainly opposition, and the enemy came against every effort of the people of God to live into what God wanted and willed. And we know that too. We experienced that too. But what we find in chapter 5, and I'm trying to hurry into this morning if you can't tell, is what we find, Jake, is that in chapter 5, it's not so much dealing with the brokenness of the physical wall. Nehemiah's addressing the fact that inside the city, the people themselves were broken. Like there was a brokenness with them. They were pretty lost about a lot of things. And Nehemiah chapter 5 and verse 1, essentially, people come to Nehemiah with, quote, a complaint. And their complaint is this: look, we're working on the wall. We're trying to do what's right. And we're going through this famine and all these issues with taxation from the Persians, and we can't afford to pay. And then when we borrow money from our own people, the nobles in our own city, the interest that they're charging is so high that we can't afford to pay it. And in some cases, they said we've had to sell our own children, our own daughters into slavery just to be able to live. Man, and that's crazy brokenness, right? And they had a legit complaint on one level. Certainly they're saying, look, we're trying to do what we can. Do you ever feel that way? Do you ever feel like you're doing your best for God and you're still dealing with, some things that just seem blatantly unfair? And that was kind of where they were coming from. Like, this isn't fair. We're working on this wall and all these things are still happening to us. And it reminds me of a verse that I reference often from Ecclesiastes chapter 9. King Solomon, David's son, said, all things come alike to all men, to the good and to the bad, to the clean and the unclean, to the righteous and the unrighteous. He kind of had observed that. Like he literally said, I was looking and considering, and this is what I've seen. All things come alike to all men. And he went on to say, essentially, it's not fair. I mean, basically what Solomon was saying was life's not fair. And I know sometimes we feel that way too. And in fact, if we look in the world around us, we not only have that as our own personal experience sometimes, but we see others that are going through some things and you think, man, that's just rough. I was considering Toby Mac. Anybody know who Toby Mac is? I mean, come on, Shirley. Toby Mac, I'm a Toby Mac guy. Toby McKeon happens to be my age, so there's that. So when he sings the song Till the Day I Die, I'm like, me and you, man, me and you. Till the wheels fall off, till the spotlight fades, I will lift your banner high. I love that song. All the way back to when he was with DC Talk, they had this song called Love is a Verb, and our series we launched the week after the birthday is called Love is a Verb, so you're going to hear a little more about, we might play a little DC Talk in here, sorry for that. But the McKeons suffered an incredible tragedy in 2019 when their son True lost his life. And it was just I'm sure there's not a scenario where it would be easy to lose a son or a daughter. Someone came to me again after the last service. Maybe there's someone in this house, you've lost a child. I can't even fathom what that would be like. And the McKeons, here's this guy that's just been hard charging for as long as I've known that he existed, just speaking God truth relentlessly and unapologetically and powerfully. And their son passed away. And one of the first public statements that Toby Mac made, he said, look, just want you guys to know that we didn't have some special deal with God. Just because we're following God and we're trying to, live for him and do the right things, and we didn't have some special deal where we would follow God as long as, these kinds of things didn't happen to us. And essentially, a real rough paraphrase, we're going to continue to follow God faithfully. I was thinking about even just yesterday, you send a son over the ocean to defend freedom, and I was thankful for Wilmington yesterday. I felt really blessed to be a part of a city that would take time and line the streets in honor of Antonio Moore, and even maybe more specifically just to love his family and encourage them. And I don't think they felt like that was unfair, because I think somewhere deep in their hearts they knew that he knew the risks when he put himself over the ocean defending our freedoms. But God forbid that we should ever not remember to appreciate that sacrifice for both he and his family. And some of that just, you see people and you're like, what are you doing with your life, man? And then you have someone that lives intentionally and sacrificially. I'm just saying, sometimes it doesn't seem very, come on somebody, help me a little bit. It doesn't seem very fair, and no one's immune. Life happens every day to everyone. That's a first takeaway for us this morning. And I don't mean for that to seem sad. It's just a statement of fact. In Nehemiah, they were working on the wall. They still had a famine. You know what I'm saying? And the famine affected everyone, not just the people that were trying to follow God. It was a part of the brokenness on this side of eternity. Incidentally, don't miss on the faithfulness of God. I would really rather walk through all the difficulties that happened in this life with God, certainly, than without him. Can I get a witness on that? Listen, he is faithful, so let's don't diminish that. And he does work miraculously. Gabriel, too, from our own church family, was in that second service for the second week in a row. He was here, and he's pressing forward, and he was raising his hand in worship. And he was, I told him he's such an incredible inspiration to me. And he said, you were such an encouragement to me. I don't even know how that works, but I was like, you were encouraging me, man. But we live into those difficult seasons, and we find God is faithful. It doesn't mean we don't face the difficult seasons, but we don't have to. I'm going to say it again. I've said it already. We don't have to face those alone. That's where the choice kind of comes to us. We can believe that God is with us. Was a week ago today that there was a helicopter crash in California. And I think sometimes when someone is renowned, like Kobe and Gianna Bryant, and they were on their way to a basketball game, and I think every death matters equally to God, whether it's someone who dies anonymously in the bush in western Zambia, an unnamed less than 2-month-old in western Zambia, and Kobe Bryant. But that doesn't mean we should grieve Kobe any less. I was very grieved by that, because you feel like you knew them, and I don't think that that's inappropriate, by the way. This is not a matter of comparison. Also, though, I think it's just another lesson. It doesn't matter how much money you have, right? I mean, it just doesn't matter. Life happens every day to everyone. Candidly, those are hard lessons sometimes, and especially when you're younger. But let's be real, some of us older folks still need to learn that lesson, right? We need to stop lodging a complaint against our faithful God. And it's okay to go to God and advocate for change. And in fact, we should. We're told to. Just don't make accusations against his character. I'm just saying God's been good to us. That's what I'm saying. And when we don't know that and we don't believe that, there's something that's broken inside of us that's more significant than any external wall that might need to be rebuilt. And man, for me, I think the first time this really came home to me, I was in my 20s and I was dating this beautiful little redhead who I've been now married to for 32 years this March. And I don't know, she was more younger than me than I knew when I first started dating her. We thought we were the same age, Naomi. I was 4 years older than her, but when we first started dating, I thought she was 18. She thought I was 18. I was 20, and she was 16. So that was, slow things down a little bit. And we had been dating for a bit, and I'd already had to sit down conversation with her mom, like, what are your intentions? And I was like, to do right by the Lord, your daughter, and you. You tell me what your expectations are. I'll try to match them. But we've been dating for a couple of years, and I really did think probably we were going to get married. And I was visiting her one weekend and went to youth group with her and stuff like that. And we got back to her house, and she just had been real melancholy the whole time. And I said, are you okay? And she said, not really. And I said, what is going on? And she said, well, my youth pastor felt like he got a word from God for me, and he told me that if I kept dating you, I was going to fall away from God. And so I'm just really confused. And that's inappropriate, by the way, but there was no point in me arguing with her about her youth pastor. He's not a bad human, but that's inappropriate, by the way. Don't look for me to give you a prophetic word about the decision you're supposed to make. I might speak to you from God's word about how to make the decision, but the decision, you and God got to sort that out. Anyway, I digress, but I said, well, why don't you take some time and figure it out? I'm not going to debate what someone else has said. I think you have to know in your own heart. And if you feel like you need a break from dating for a bit, then, let's do that. And I was all like, tough guy, and I got this, and I acted like it was cool. And then I got my car. And I was like, God, this is not fair. I've done right by her. I ain't leading her to hell or nothing. I was like, that guy is a nut, and I don't even know what his problem is. And I'm driving home. It was in February, ironically, and it was cold. We were originally from Arkansas in the Midwest, and the foothills of the Ozarks was where I lived. So I left Little Rock, Central Arkansas, and was driving slightly more mountainous as I progressed. I came over this one hill that sort of is the separator from two. Usually it's like 5 or 10 degrees warmer on that side than this side. And as I came down the back side of that hill on the north side, solid ice, man, solid ice. And I wasn't ready for it. I was busy, And then my car, I was fighting it. I was e-braking and everything, trying to keep this car in the road. Just bought this car too, man. I traded the ugliest car in the history of history for this car. I had a 1976 Datsun B210 turquoise green with honeycomb hubcaps. And when I took it to the car dealer, I heard, oh, wow, that's a rare car. I heard, it's not as nice as that Ford in the parking lot right now, Eddie's truck. But I heard the sales manager saying he wants to trade this in. And I heard the guy say, I wouldn't give him $200 for that if I wanted it, But they probably jacked the price up or whatever. They gave me my trade. Bought this Toyota Corolla. And no, that's not true. It was a Nissan Sentra. I'm just all kind of wrong. It was a Nissan Sentra. And so I'm driving that car home that night, and I hit a patch of ice. And the whole way down that hill, it was like I was always destined to hit this one part of the ditch, and the car nosed into the ditch. And I should say here that it wasn't just a car, Ray. That was my house. Anybody ever been a college student that you lived at college but not really? You know what I'm saying? Like, it was an hour from home, and I've made that trip a lot. My girlfriend lived in Little Rock, so I just kept my stuff in my car. I had just very little stuff in my actual apartment. And, man, my car, it was like slow-mo. It dug into the ditch, and then it just sort of sat up on the nose, and everything that wasn't in the boot was now on the dash. You know what I'm saying? Everything in the back seat, everything off the back dash, all my stuff. And I thought for a second we were going to go back down this way, but it didn't work that way. It went on over on its top. And I scrambled out real quick and unbuckled, not thinking that was going to be a gravitational issue. I remember unbuckling, falling. Oh, and I kind of only hurt myself when I unbuckled. I crawled out, and it was a rural area, but it was right across from someone's house. This guy came out, son, you okay? I said, yeah. My car looks okay too. I had just bought it. My granddad gave me the money and I was going to pay him back so I didn't have to get insurance. That's a bad idea. This was a long time ago, people. It was a long time ago. It's not what they're teaching in Financial Peace University, I promise. And I tried to talk this old man into helping me flip it back over. I said, I think we can flip it back over. And so he was like, no, son, we can't do that. So I used his phone. I was only about 8 miles from home. And I called my dad, and I said, Dad, get my brother, Daryl. I said, get Daryl and come over here. I think we can flip it back over. And he said, no, it's ice everywhere. We're not going to try to be on the side of that road flipping a car over. I said, but it was like a funnel. I was always going to land up in that place in the ditch. He said, how many wrecks have you seen right there in your life? And I said, none. All right, we'll come back and get it in the morning. The next morning we got up, bacon and eggs and Scooby-Doo, but I'm rushing my dad. It was Saturday, so I'm like, Dad, we got to go. It'll be all right. Let's let the ice melt a little bit. Then the phone rang, and it was the guy that was across the street from my house, which was in the ditch. And he says, hey, I don't know how to break this to you, but a car just came down the hill and slammed into the side of your car, ripped a tire off and knocked it way on down the ditch. Where it was laying was a little bit flat. Where it slid was like that. And I'm like, oh, man, Dad, we got to go. So we getting boots on and getting in the truck, and the phone rang again just before we went out the house. And it's the guy again. He said, you're not going to believe this. Try me. He said, a van just came down the hill and flipped over on top of your car. Smushed it. And now it's not even in a flat spot. Smushed it down in the ditch. Man, and we got over there. It was a 1972 Dodge tradesman van that weighed approximately as much as an oil tanker. And no, that guy didn't have insurance either. And it was totaled. My car was totaled. That was Saturday. Sunday, I had to be back at school. So my parents, were going to drive me the hour back to school, which back then seemed like a long ways. You know what I'm saying? And we're going down the interstate. We got about maybe 3/4 of the way there, and my mom's car quit on the side of the interstate. I had to walk about 2 miles back to the nearest exit and use a payphone at the liquor store to try to get someone to come get us. And I just got to tell you, I was the whiniest dude in that 2 miles down the interstate. Interstate 40, ironically, because I also grew up fairly close to I-40. And I was like, God, this ain't right. I didn't say it this way, but this is how I would have said it had I been living in Nehemiah's. I was working on the wall and everything, and now my house is in the ditch, and a van? Really, a van. A bicycle, maybe, but a van. That ain't fair. That's not fair. And my girlfriend, and then that youth pastor, it's probably his fault. Right? Because there was some stuff in me I didn't know or believe truth in some ways I needed to just live life. Because life happens every day to everyone. And if you're going to work on the wall, you will not be somehow immune to those kinds of challenges. They're still going to come. They're still going to come your way. And that next week was kind of a breakthrough for me, spiritually speaking. I remember spending a lot of time trying to understand what just happened. I had some people in my life that spoke into my life and spoke some encouragement to me. And I remember one guy in particular. I was serving as a volunteer youth pastor at a church near there. I met a pastor playing basketball, and he recruited me to be the youth pastor. I remember him saying to me, I'm sorry all this is happening to you, but I hope you'll remember how blessed you are. When someone first says something like that, you're like, I'm going to bless you. And then he just started a review of all the great things, the song we sang to open this morning, all the great things. And he was right. Right? Now, Karen, she couldn't stay away from me. So by the end of the week, we were at a revival together. And God's big enough to restore the things that are meant to be restored if we'll trust in Him. But more than that, He changed something in the way that I looked at life. The people here, they were broken. It wasn't just the people who had money mistreating the people who didn't. They were both living in some brokenness in regards to money. The people who didn't have money, you're willing to sell your daughters into slavery so that you can live. That's not a life I'm into. There was a lot of brokenness. This poverty mindset impacts people who don't have money, and in some cases, people who do have money. The bottom line is that if you have money issues, it's pretty possible that you also have heart issues, right? And I'm not saying money issues as in sometimes it's hard to pay our bills. I'm saying, though, that when money starts to own your heart or cause you to lose your peace or your joy or your contentment. Paul wrote to Timothy in 1 Timothy 6 and verse 6 and said this, true godliness with contentment is itself great wealth. When we land in a space where our hearts are good with whatever we've got, that's being rich. Then you can, and then listen, don't just make this about money. Some of us in this house this morning, we're feeling like if I just had that relationship, like if I had what they had, like there's envy that sets in on us. If I had that 32 Ford sitting in the parking lot, I would be a little bit happier, but we feel like but it's the job. The job is why I don't have any peace or joy. You can have just the right job. If you ain't got Jesus, you ain't got joy. Pardon the poor grammar. But there's some that has to be healed inside of us that only God can heal. And when that stuff, when the wall in here, when the truth in here is right and right with God, man, you can be going through difficult seasons where you're straddling a barbed wire fence with a bobcat under both arms and never get a scratch. It's about as country as I can sound right there. Come on, West Virginia, back me up. You know it's true. It's true. And you can be living what almost anyone else on planet Earth would consider the most blessed life and be miserable living it when you're broken in here. And I'm going to tell you somebody that can repair that bit of the wall, as it were. And his name is Jesus. After all, Paul said, we brought nothing with us when we came into the world, and we can't take anything with us when we leave it. So if we have enough food and clothing, let us be content. But people who long to be rich fall into temptation. And it's not the being rich that's a problem. It's not even a little. God, there are a lot of incredibly wealthy people in the Bible God used tremendously because they had a heart. It's like this whole conversation about, man, God's doing so much in the church, and there's some pastors that are just incredibly famous. It's not wrong to be famous. It's just wrong to want to be famous. Right? And it's certainly okay to even feel called to build wealth as long as you own your money and your money don't own you. What are you going to do with what you got when you get it? That's the big story here. And he says, in fact, people who long to be rich fall into temptation. That's the trick. That's where you got to be careful. And are trapped by foolish and harmful desires and that plunge them into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. Is money the root of all kinds of evil? No, it's not. Money is neutral. In case you didn't know, it's a tool. It's something that God gave us so that we could exchange work for work, right? I mean, come on. That's basic economics here. But what we do with what we have, whatever that refers to, is what's critical. The love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And some people craving money have wandered from the true faith and pierced themselves with many sorrows. So Nehemiah addressed that. He addressed it, and he really called the nobles out, and he said, look, we've even been loaning money. Me and my brothers, we're not going to charge any more interest. This is in-house, he said. This is in-house. So we're going to give everything back. Anything that someone is essentially used as collateral in any loan, we're just giving that back to them, and we're forgiving the loan, and we're going to be family in this, right? And so generosity was a big part of the healing that happened when the wall was rebuilt in Jerusalem, and it's certainly a part of the healing that's meant to happen with us as well. Verse 14, he went on to say, moreover, from the time that I was appointed to be their governor in the land of Judah, from the 20th year to the 32nd year of Artaxerxes the king, 12 years, neither I nor my brothers ate the food allowance of the governor. So they had a right to do some things they didn't even choose to do. Now, one big and important takeaway in regards to that is that truth learned by example is truth remembered for a lifetime. Because we're talking, Bethany, about rebuilding the wall. So in that context, if there's something we feel like needs to change, well, obviously the first place we want it to change is with us. And you know this with those beautiful little princesses, your daughters that live in your house. How what you do is even more impactful than what you say. And Nehemiah knew and understood. He was doing the right thing, I think, Joe, because the right thing is the right thing to do. I do believe that. But I also understand that it's really impactful. If we want to be people who rebuild the wall of truth, and all I'm trying to say is let's live it. Let's live it. And that's a pretty consistent theme with me here, but it's powerfully true. We often do what's easy or obvious rather than choosing obedient faith. And that was another part of what was happening with Nehemiah, Bob. He could have just said, well, I'm already here. I left the Susa. I left a cushy job. I came here and inspired these people who weren't even noticing the need anymore. And so now we all rebuild and we're getting this done. I'm definitely taking the allowance, but he understood the burden that that would put on the people. And so he made a choice. And again, this isn't about money to me. It's that God spoke something to Nehemiah, and Nehemiah was generous and surrendered enough to be willing to be obedient. The real key here is just the obedient faith. And candidly, that's what stewardship is. Whatever you have and whatever you are, poverty mindset is, I better keep it for me. And we're called actually to stewardship. For the Christian, that means obedient faith. That's really the only delineator to me. And I know, and I say this often here, that in our world, what we're taught or told as well, that's all good and fine. I hear it too. Don't think I don't hear it as a pastor. I got people that care about me and don't love the choices that we make sometimes, and they'll say things like, well, that's all good and fine, but you better look out for number one. And you know what? They're right. They're absolutely right. The confusion is just about who's number one. Yeah, you're right. You're right. We are supposed to look out for number one. It just so happens that I'm not number one and you're not number one. He's number one, and ironically, he's been busy looking out for us. If you're part of the church family, you've heard that before. Because I say it quite a lot. And not enough. Because it's true. And Paul again to Timothy in Timothy 6, and this time verse 18, said this: tell them to use their money to do good. Get money, please, by all means, make some money. I love the idea of having money. I'm going to test that out one day. It's going to be neat, and I'll let you know what it's like. But, and I might want to reword that a little bit. I mean, we're blessed. I'm joking a little bit because I've been some places in the world, and everybody said, and I know, again, some of you, I don't want you to be offended by this because maybe you're going through a difficult financial season right now, but we are crazy blessed. Where we stay right now, where we live right now, we are blessed. And in this context, there's a part of me that wanted to reword that a little bit. Tell those who have money to use their money to do good. And I suppose there's a little bit of an inference there. If you use your money to do good, you must have money. But I almost want to say those who have money. You know what I'm saying? Like those that have, not those that have money, but those that have money. Use their money to do good. Because sometimes that's who we want to be. And again, we're not just talking about money. Maybe we're talking about time or talent or treasure, those things we talk about in that context, our hands and our hearts to serve. And somehow we have a way of deciding we're not the ones who have anything. We don't have enough margin, but there's somebody ought to be doing something. Rebuild this wall, get some work going around here. He didn't say tell those who have money to use their money. He just said tell them, that's us, to use their money to do good. They should be rich in good works. And so even if you don't have money, be rich in good works and generous to those in need. Always being ready to share with others. One of our 6 values or value statements here at 828 Church is generosity. And you can pick up a copy of our value statements at Mission Control. I've said that in 2 services already, so if they happen to be out, we'll get a few more for next week. But we try to keep some copies there, and I think it's good to know. One of our value statements is generosity. Sometimes as a team, we have to say, okay, our margin's a little tight this month, so we need to be frugal. And we'll tell our team, look, be frugal, but you still are not going to find unsalted tops in the cafe. We say, look, frugal doesn't mean poverty mindset. We're blessed to be a blessing, and it is a blessing to be a blessing. So we will do the best we can with what we have. That's called stewardship. By doing this, they will be storing up treasures as a good foundation for the future so they may experience true life. And I love that too. Paul's grand advice there, Ray, was look, if you're generous, what you're actually doing in building your own wall is you're laying a foundation for a good life. And the good life is not what maybe those who live without a relationship with God would consider a good life. And in fact, what he says is a good foundation for true life. Praise break. Real life. Life with Christ and all he wills for us. Karen and I for years served in a missions organization. And when I say years, I mean plus 20. And so a lot of times what that looked like, especially early in our missions journey, I would be calling pastors I didn't know, Mary, and asking them, hey, I'm Ron, and I work with a university student ministry. Could I come to your church and cast a vision? And, and whatever. And that was pretty tough sledding. I got to the point where I was preaching at a different church most every Sunday, and you get a lot of interaction with missionaries, which is really cool. And there was one particular young lady that wrote in a newsletter about an experience she had had. She was trying to book services, and she called this church in Southern California, in San Francisco, and she asked for a service. What she didn't realize was that it was a homeless church. It was literally a mission. So this couple had started a mission, and they started a church, but it got listed in the list of churches, but they didn't have a building or anything like that, Chris. They went into the city, and they would, on a Sunday morning, take a guitar and, go and do church for people that learned that they were there, put out a few signs, man, you don't have a facility crisis, I guess, and just rock up and do church. So that she called this guy, and his first response was to say, oh, I guess you didn't know we're a homeless church. But before he could get that out, Natalie, he thought, hey, that would actually be really cool. So he said, well, yeah, we would love for you to come. What's your schedule? And then he told her, well, I just need to be honest, we're a homeless church. So I don't know how good the offering is going to be, or monthly support may not be possible. But she said, well, that would still be cool. And that would be the response, I think, of almost any, at least missionary, I would hope. I know I would have loved to have done that. And so she went and spoke, and the church, she kept telling them, this missionary's coming. They got so excited that before she got there, they were collecting cans and probably panhandling for mission. I don't know how that works. But when she got there, they actually gave her a really good offering. Homeless people. And then they picked her up monthly. And so she said, I don't know if that's still true today, but back then she was being supported monthly by a homeless church, by people who lived on the street. And I just think that's a beautiful truth and reality, that generosity has nothing to do with how much money you have in your pocket. It has everything to do with what's happening in your heart. I think one of the saddest scriptures in the entire Bible is the scripture that Ezekiel wrote. God spoke to him prophetically, and this is what he said: I sought for a man among them who should build up the wall and stand in the breach before me for the land, that I should not destroy it. But I found none. And I always, I think it's a good prayer to pray, and I've prayed this, that God would let us be someone who would stand in the gap. That's a kind of that's a colloquial phrase that we use sometimes, even outside of Christendom. That's where it comes from. Like, God's looking for people who will be willing to stand in the gap, make up the hedge, rep truth, tell the real story. Tell the real story about how you didn't always choose well and God loved you anyway. Tell the real story about how even when it went wrong, God redeemed it, right? Tell the real story. But and being someone who'll love people. And last night's men's event was amazing. I think there was 50 guys there. And David, who'll be on the guitar here in just a second, just talked about how even after his dad passed away when he was 16, how men in his church stepped up and really, really loved him. And that he wouldn't be here if it weren't for that. That God's looking for people, but in this story in Ezekiel, nobody. So we had vision night on Wednesday night here at 828 Church, and it was a blast. And we'll try to give you a synoptic of that in our midweek email that'll go out this week if you didn't get to be here for that. And we put a lot of prep in to just try to share and cast a really impactful vision. But I got to tell you, the best vision cast I heard this week was not me with a mic on Wednesday. It was a gentleman in our church named Johnny Bordeaux who came in on Tuesday. Now, Johnny is 84 years old, and he's been married to Miss Nancy for 63 years. 84. He came to Jesus when he was in his early 30s, and he's been chasing him, Jeremy, like crazy since then. And Johnny said that recently, he's been, since they started coming to 828, and they kind of been back and forth with us a little bit just because they knew people, but they were committed somewhere else. But recently they just really felt like God sent them our way, and boy, are we thankful. But he was saying, often on a Sunday he might say, hey, well, let's go to church. Very faithful. But he said God actually convicted him about that. Like, you don't just go to church. That's what God spoke to him. You don't just go to church. It's not who you are. You go to worship me. It's not just going to church. No one's checking something off the list here. And in addition to that, paraphrasing, but he said not only did God say you don't just go to church, you go to worship me, but you participate. You don't go to church, you participate in church. And he came with a vision. I mean, it was amazing. I was blown away. He had a little notebook, a little bitty spiral like notebook where you put the papers in, and he had bullet points. It was such a good vision cast. And he said, Nancy and I can't hang with you young 40 and 50-year-olds. He's 30 years older than I am. He said, we can't hang with you young 30 or 40 and 50-year-olds, but we still know that we can make a difference. And he said, we would like to basically do a life group for people that are more like maybe we decided 65 and up or something like that, And I mean, he's 84, but hey, man. I mean, we could host it at our house, and he is a cook. I mean, some of you ought to get some great wigs and just go, because I'm telling you, the man, first Thursday in March, middle of the day at the Bordeaux's, it ain't going to be nothing but good. He said, don't count me out. I still have something to bring to this. I'm a kingdom builder too. And he said, I don't want to just do a Bible study. We want to build community. Because people, he said, sometimes people in the church they don't have a history with God. And they need somebody to really invest in their journey, basically. That is definitively a paraphrase, because what he said was the church is dumb as a stump. But no, he said, and I want to build community. He said, I can still drive in the daylight, so I'll be happy to take people to the doctor. And he said, as long as I can get my mower there, I can mow their grass. He's 84. Are you paying attention right now? Essentially what he's saying is don't leave me out. Now that's something that's healed inside his heart. I mean, honestly, I want to be Johnny Bordeaux when I grow up. Johnny isn't Ezekiel 22:30. I sought for a man among them and found none. John and Nancy are Isaiah 6:8. I said this Wednesday, and I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send and who will go for us? And then I said, here am I. Send me. And the inflection in that, as I said Wednesday, isn't I sought for a man among them, I heard the voice of the Lord saying, whom shall I send and who will go for us? And I looked around, there wasn't anyone, so I was like, okay, if no one else will do it. It's not like that, Marlene. The inflection in this is that, whom shall I send and who will go for us? And then I said, me, pick me, here am I, send me, pick me. That's what I saw in 84-year-old Johnny Bordeaux on Tuesday, me. Let me participate. He even pulled a Kingdom Builders check out of his pocket. And I don't know how much it was. I didn't look. It wasn't my business. But I was inspired. I still am. I know this, that a lot of what ails us, generosity, is the antidote. In fact, consider this as the worship team joins us on the stage. Generosity is God's antidote for selfishness. For pride, jealousy, envy, discouragement, and a litany of other joy-stealing strategies of our enemy. Just choosing to be generous. It's amazing how much that heals so much of our hearts. We'd be like, God didn't. No, when you choose to be generous, you stop thinking about what you don't have and start appreciating what you do have. Matthew 11, Jesus sort of called us out on it. He said, I'll read from the Message in just a second, but for those of you who might know the older translation, he said, come to me, all you who labor and are heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke upon you. And I always struggle with that. Take my yoke? Are you kidding? Just all that are heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. Rest is what I need, but now you're saying take a yoke. That seems contradictory, right? And what God's really saying is step into this, people. You feel all worn out. I mean, it seems counterintuitive, but we know now more than ever, if you're physically really tired, one of the things you need is exercise. And if your faith's worn out, well, why don't we just use it a little bit? Why don't we just use it a little bit and then see what happens? Your faith is all worn out, you burned out, well, then why don't we use our faith a little bit and stand into some obedience and see God re-energize us for His glory and the good of others? And we'll benefit in the process. And point of fact, Iranism, take my yoke. Well, that metaphor, Bailey, speaks to a couple of oxen that are yoked together pulling a cart. And the truth is, anybody want to try to quote me? When you yoke up with the big ox in the yard, the cart is not so hard to pull. From the Message, are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. I love this. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. Insert photo of John and Nancy Bordeaux here. And I think it's a lifestyle. I think kingdom builders, generosity and surrender, that's a lifestyle. And I haven't mastered this yet. Our flesh tries to hold on to what we only get to keep when we give it away. So I'm kind of idealistic. I'll admit that. It was probably an unnecessary confession, but I am a bit idealistic. And I always want to make sure that on my driver's license, in case I keel over something, if somebody needs any of my organs, they can have them. And so I'm an organ donor like that. And about a year or two ago, I don't even know where I saw it, but I saw something about being a living donor. And I thought, well, that's cool. You can actually give organs away while you're alive. Only a part of your liver, but you can give away a kidney. You got two. I do, as far as I know. And I do know factually now. And I signed up, and I didn't hear anything. And I'm going to just throw a little tag in here. If you're married, talk to your spouse before you do that, because I didn't do that, and I'm still in trouble. I didn't think it through. And my wife said to me, and I quote, "You give everything away, and now you're giving away body parts." So we're still working through that. You can pray for us. But no one asked for a kidney for a while. And then the organization I'd signed up with hit me up and they said, hey, there's a guy in New York, it's 58 years old, gave me his name and all of his information. They said he's not going to get to see his grandkids grow up if he doesn't get a kidney soon. And you seem to be a preliminary match. And so there was another step or two, and we're getting ready for me to get some blood work done here in Wilmington. And they were making plans, asking me when I could fly to New York for a potential surgery and that sort of thing. And then he actually directly connected with me, which was kind of amazing. So we were texting back and forth, and I was getting ready to go to Southern Africa, or South Africa specifically, with Kinsey and Carly, and message back and forth, hey, I'll be back in a couple of weeks. And so we were looking at, depending on how he was doing, maybe doing a surgery right before Christmas or right after Christmas. We were on the plane in Atlanta getting ready to fly to Joburg, and he texted me and he said, hey man, one of the other donors that was cleared ahead of you and is a perfect match, and I'm going to get to have my surgery in the next 2 weeks. Thanks anyway, and it was awesome. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. And we went on to George, South Africa, which is one of our best church partners, and I have a lot of friends there. And one of them was close enough to me to know that I was in a little bit of trouble for giving a kidney away without talking to Karen about it first. And they said, well, I guess you get to keep your kidney. And I thought about it a little. And I said, well, I don't think so, because I already gave it away. I'm still in their database. And I'm not going to ask for it back. And I think that's how we're supposed to live our God lives. I'm not trying to talk you into giving away a kidney. And you better talk to your spouse, and if you have small children, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But I am advocating for giving your life away to God. Just in an obedient and generous surrender to Him. And the requirements of the kingdom are kind and simultaneously incredible and impactful. And I don't know, I'm going to keep the kidney here till they need it. And I don't know if they'll ever ask for it. And I feel that way about a lot of the life that I have right now. I don't know that God's ever going to say, hey, give that away. Or I don't know how that's going to work. I did tell Karen. She said, well, you love other people. I said, well, I would give you both my kidneys. that fixed it. For God, I'm not holding anything back. It is an honor to get, to give.